The attack came without warning on a cold morning 6 months after the wedding. Valera was in her private chambers reviewing trade agreements when Counselor Mira burst through the door. The older woman's face was pale, her scales flushed with fear. "Your Majesty, the Keth have broken the ceasefire. 3 border colonies have gone silent." The Lyra felt her blood turn cold. "Silent? What do you mean silent?" "No communications. No distress signals. Our scout ships found only debris and bodies. The colonies are gone. All of them. Over 2 million people." Within the hour, Valera had assembled her war council in the Great Strategy Chamber. Admirals, generals, and intelligence chiefs filled the room. Their voices raised an argument and accusation at the back of the chamber. Almost invisible in the shadows sat Danny Cole. Valera had invited him as a courtesy. The humans were allies, after all, and he was their representative. She did not expect him to contribute anything. Admiral Tyros, the commander of the Thashan fleet, slammed his fist on the table. "We must respond immediately. Every hour we wait, the Keth advance further into our territory." "With what ships?" General Voss demanded. "Our main fleet is positioned to defend the core worlds. If we move them to the border, we leave ourselves open to attack from behind. The Keth have been planning this for years," Intelligence Chief Nara added grimly. "Their new warlord, Gorak, has united the clans under a single banner. He has resources we did not anticipate." Valera listened to her advisors argue. Each one had valid points. Each one had fears and concerns that could not be dismissed. But no one had solutions. "How many ships do they have in the sector?" she asked. Admiral Tyros consulted his data. "At least 300 capital vessels, Your Majesty. We have perhaps 100 that could respond in time." 3-to-1 odds, Valera said quietly. "And the Keth are not known for their mercy. If we engage directly, we will lose," Tyros admitted. "But if we do not engage, they will continue to advance. They will take world after world until they reach the core systems themselves." The room fell silent. Every option led to disaster. Every path led to death, if I may. The voice was quiet, almost casual. Everyone turned to look at the human in the corner. Danny had risen from his seat. His posture had changed somehow. He stood straighter, his eyes moving across the tactical displays with sharp focus. "The Keth supply lines run through the Narak corridor," he said. "It's the only viable route for ships that size. There are 3 choke points along the corridor, all of them dependent on a single refueling station." He walked to the main display and pointed to a location deep in enemy territory. "Here, coordinates 773 by 429 by 0-8-1. Admiral Tyros stared at him. "How would you know this?" "That information is not in any public database." Danny shrugged. "I read a lot. You read classified Keth military intelligence?" "I read whatever I can get my hands on. Supply chains are interesting to me. Professional curiosity." Valera watched her husband carefully. There was something different about him now. The easygoing gardener had disappeared. In his place stood someone harder, more focused. Someone who looked at a star map and saw things that trained military officers had missed. "Check the coordinates," she ordered. Tyros worked the controls with skeptical hands. The display zoomed in on the location Danny had indicated. A moment later, the Admiral's scales went pale. "There's a station there." Exactly where he said. Our intelligence had it listed as a minor outpost, but the energy readings... He ran calculations quickly. If this station is feeding their entire forward fleet, and we destroyed it, their ships would have approximately 6 days of operational capacity, Danny said calmly. After that, they would have to pull back or risk running dry in hostile space. You would not need to defeat them. You would just need to outlast them. The room erupted in discussion. Officers crowded around the display, running simulations and debating tactics. Hope had entered the chamber for the first time. Valera did not join the discussion. Instead, she walked to where Danny stood at the edge of the group. That was not the observation of someone who reads supply chain reports for fun, she said quietly. Danny's expression flickered. I spent a lot of years studying logistics, Valera. You learn to see patterns. What patterns did you see in a classified Keth military database? He was quiet for a moment. Some patterns are universal. Resources have to flow. Armies have to eat. Ships have to refuel. If you understand how things move, you understand how to stop them from moving. And you just happen to remember the exact coordinates of this station. I have a good memory. She wanted to press further. She wanted to demand the truth. But her admirals were calling for her attention, and there was a war to plan. The raid on the refueling station was launched 3 days later. A small, fast strike force slipped through Keth defenses using routes that Danny had quietly suggested. They hit the station hard and fast, destroying it completely before enemy reinforcements could respond. The effect was immediate. The Keth advance stopped. Their great fleet sat motionless in space, ships running low on fuel and supplies. Warlord Garuk had no choice but to order a retreat. The Thashan Empire had bought itself time in the celebrations that followed. Danny stayed in the background. He accepted no praise, gave no interviews, made no claims of credit. When anyone asked about his role, he simply said he had made a few suggestions. But Valera could not forget what she had seen in that council chamber. The way his eyes had moved across the tactical displays. The precise, certain way he had spoken about enemy movements and weaknesses. That was not a logistics coordinator. That was something else entirely. She found him that night in his usual place on the balcony, watching the moons rise. You saved millions of lives today, she said, sitting beside him. Your admirals saved millions of lives. I just pointed at a map, Danny. She waited until he looked at her. Who are you, really? The question hung in the air between them. For a long moment, he did not answer. She could see him weighing options, considering responses, deciding how much truth to reveal. I'm your husband, he said finally. I'm a man who wants a quiet life. And I'm someone who will do whatever is necessary to protect the people he cares about. It was not an answer, but it was a promise. And somewhere deep in enemy space, Warlord Garuk was planning his revenge. The counterattack came 2 weeks later, and it came straight for the heart of the Empire. Valera was in her private study when the first explosions shook the palace. The lights flickered. Alarms began screaming throughout the building. She ran to the window and saw fire rising from the outer walls. Councilor Myra burst in seconds later. Your Majesty, Keth dropships have landed in the city. They bypassed our orbital defenses completely. We think they had help from traitors in the defense grid. How many? We do not know. Hundreds, perhaps thousands. They are fighting through the streets toward the palace. Valera's blood ran cold. This was not an invasion. This was an assassination. Warlord Garuk was coming for her personally. Where's Danny? She asked. I do not know, Your Majesty. We need to get you to the emergency bunker immediately. 4 royal guards escorted Valera through the palace corridors. The sounds of battle grew louder with every step. Gunfire, explosions, screams. The Keth were already inside the building. They reached a junction and found bodies. Thashan guards, torn apart by weapons designed to breach starship armor. The Keth were not taking prisoners. This way, Your Majesty, the lead guard said. Pulling her toward a side passage, they made it 20 steps before the wall exploded. Valera was thrown to the ground, her ears ringing. Through the smoke and dust, she saw massive shapes emerging from the breach. Keth shock troops, each one standing 8 feet tall, covered in black armor, carrying weapons that glowed with deadly energy. 2 of her guards were already dead. The remaining 2 stood over her, weapons raised, knowing they could not win but determined to die trying. "The Queen," one of the Keth said, his voice like grinding metal. "Warlord Gorak will be pleased. Kill the guards. Take her alive." The Keth advanced. Valera closed her eyes, waiting for the end. "That's not going to happen." The voice was calm, almost casual. Valera's eyes snapped open. Danny stood at the end of the corridor. He was wearing the same simple clothes he always wore. He had no armor. He carried no weapons. He looked exactly like what his file said he was. An ordinary man who had no business being anywhere near a battlefield. The lead Keth laughed. "A human? One human thinks he can stop us." "I'm giving you one chance," Danny said. His voice had changed. It was still quiet, but there was something underneath it now. Something cold. "Turn around. Walk away. Tell Garig he made a mistake. Kill him," the Keth commander ordered. 3 warriors charged forward, weapons raised. What happened next would stay with Valera for the rest of her life. Danny moved. He did not run or dodge or take cover. He simply moved toward the Keth like water flowing around stones. The first warrior swung a blade that could cut through steel. Danny was not there when it landed. He was beside the warrior, his hand finding a gap in the armor at the neck. The Keth fell without a sound. The second warrior fired his weapon. Danny had already shifted, the blast passing through empty air where he had been a heartbeat before. He caught the warrior's arm, twisted, and the weapon discharged into the third Keth's chest. In 3 seconds, 3 Keth shock troops were down. The remaining 4 hesitated. They had killed hundreds of enemies across a dozen worlds. They had never seen anything like this. Danny did not hesitate. He flowed through them like a ghost. Every movement was precise, efficient, deadly. He found weak points in armor that should have had none. He redirected strikes with a touch, turning the Keth's own strength against them. He killed without passion, without anger, without apparent effort. In 11 seconds, 7 Keth shock troops lay dead on the floor. Danny stood among the bodies, not even breathing hard. He reached down and picked up a fallen energy rifle, checking its charge with the ease of long practice. Then he looked at Valera. For a moment, she did not recognize him. The man standing before her was not her husband. This was something else. Something ancient and dangerous, wearing a human face. "More will be coming," Danny said. His voice was still calm. "We need to move. Can you walk?" Valera found her feet. Her surviving guards helped her up, staring at Danny with something like fear. "Who are you?" she whispered. Danny's expression softened slightly. For just a moment, she saw the man she had married behind those cold eyes. "Someone who should have told you the truth a long time ago," he said. "But we don't have time for that now. Stay behind me." They moved through the palace in a nightmare of smoke and blood. Twice more they encountered Keth squads. Each time, Danny dealt with them so quickly that Valera barely had time to register the threat before it was over. He moved differently now. He walked differently. Even his breathing was different. Everything about him had changed. This was what he had been hiding. This was the weight he carried. They reached the emergency bunker just as Thashan forces began to push back the invasion. Inside the secure command center, Valera finally had a moment to breathe. She turned to face her husband. "Explain," she said. Now, Danny set down the rifle he had been carrying. He suddenly looked tired, old, like a man who had been running for a very long time and had finally stopped. "My real name is Daniel Collison," he said quietly. "I was not a logistics coordinator. I was a member of a human special operations unit so classified that officially it does not exist. I have been a soldier since I was 17 years old. I have done things that I cannot speak about, in places that are not on any map. I have killed more people than I can count." Valera stared at him. "The humans sent me an assassin?" "They sent you a weapon," Danny corrected. "One they wanted to hide somewhere no one would think to look. One they thought would never be needed again." He met her eyes. "I am sorry, Valera. I wanted to be the man in the file. I wanted that more than anything. But I could not let them hurt you." Outside, the sounds of battle were fading. The Keth assault had failed, but inside the bunker, something far more important had shattered. Valera looked at the man she had married and realized she did not know him at all. The bunker was quiet now. The battle reports on the screens showed green instead of red. The Keth assault had been pushed back. The city was being secured. The immediate crisis was over, but Valera felt no relief. She sat across from Danny in a small private room off the main command center. 2 cups of tea sat untouched on the table between them. Her husband looked different now. Not physically, but in the way he held himself. The mask of the simple gardener was gone. "Tell me everything," she said. Danny was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with memory. "I grew up on a colony world at the edge of human space. When I was 17, raiders hit my town. They killed my parents. They killed almost everyone I knew. A military rescue team found me 3 days later. I had survived by hiding in the water treatment plant." He paused. "The soldiers who found me saw something. I do not know what. They offered me a choice. I could go to a refugee camp and start over as a normal citizen. Or I could come with them and learn to make sure what happened to my town never happened to anyone else. You chose to fight. I chose to fight. They trained me for 8 years. Not regular military training. Something else. Something deeper. They taught me how to move, how to think, how to see the world in ways normal people cannot. They broke me down and built me back up as something new." Valera thought of the way he had moved through those Keth warriors. Fluid, precise, inhuman. What did they call you? Danny's jaw tightened. "The quiet death, because enemies who saw me did not live to tell anyone about it. For 30 years, I was the solution to problems that could not be solved through normal means. When diplomacy failed, when armies could not reach, when everything else was impossible, they sent me. How many missions? I stopped counting after 200. It would not help you to know the number." Valera absorbed this. Her husband, the man who tended her gardens and made friends with her kitchen staff, had been one of the deadliest weapons in human history. "Why did you stop?" Danny closed his eyes. "Because I broke. Not physically. Something inside me. I woke up one morning and I could not remember why I was doing it anymore. I could not remember what it felt like to be a person instead of a tool. I walked into my commander's office and told him I was done. And they just let you go? No, they do not just let people like me go. We know too much. We can do too much. They had to put me somewhere safe. Somewhere I could not talk, could not be found, could not be used by anyone else." A bitter smile crossed his face. Marriage to an alien queen on the other side of the galaxy seemed perfect to them. Hide the weapon in plain sight. You were never supposed to be needed again. No, I was supposed to grow old quietly and die without anyone ever knowing what I had been. And honestly, Valera, that was what I wanted too. When I stepped off that ship and saw this world, I felt something I had not felt in decades. Hope, peace, the possibility of being something other than death with a human face. He looked at her directly. "I was not pretending with you. Everything I felt, everything I said, that was real. I wanted to be Danny, the logistics coordinator. I wanted to be your husband. I wanted to watch sunsets and grow vegetables and forget what my hands were trained to do. Valera felt something in her chest. Anger, yes. Betrayal, but also something else. Understanding, perhaps. Or pity. Why did you not tell me? Because I was afraid. His voice cracked slightly. Afraid that if you knew what I was, you would look at me differently. That the peace I found here would disappear. That I would become the weapon again instead of the man. He spread his hands. And now here we are. She was quiet for a long time. The weight of his confession sat between them like a physical thing. The Kath will return, she said finally. Gorak will not accept this defeat. No, he will not. Can you stop him? Danny met her eyes. In that moment, she saw both men he had been. The killer and the gardener. The weapon and the husband. Yes, he said quietly. I can stop him. But if I do, if I step back into that world, I do not know if I can ever leave it again. Everyone will know. The galaxy will know. I will never be invisible again. Is that such a terrible thing? I do not know. For 30 years, invisibility was the only thing that kept me safe. That kept the people around me safe. When you become known, you become a target. And everyone near you becomes a target too. Valera reached across the table and took his hands. They were ordinary hands, calloused from gardening, warm and human. It was hard to believe they had killed hundreds of people. I have been a target my entire life, she said. I was born a target. Every queen is. Every leader is. We do not get to choose safety, Danny. We only get to choose what we fight for. And what are you choosing? I am choosing my people, my empire, my husband. She squeezed his hands. I am choosing you. All of you. Not just the gardener. Not just the weapon. The whole man. Danny stared at her. For a moment, his eyes were wet. You should hate me, he whispered. I lied to you. I hid what I was. I let you believe you married someone ordinary. Perhaps. But you also saved my life. You saved my city. And when you had every reason to stay hidden, you chose to protect me instead. She lifted his hands and pressed them to her cheeks. I do not need an ordinary husband, Danny. I need someone who will stand beside me when the darkness comes. Can you be that person? He was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. Yes, he said. I can be that person. Then let the galaxy see what humanity sent to protect me. Let them see what happens when they threaten the Thashan Empire and the Human Alliance. Let them all see. Outside, alarms began to sound again. An officer burst into the room. Your Majesty! Warlord Garuk's flagship has broken through our orbital defenses. He's landing personally with his elite guard. Danny rose to his feet. The tired, broken man vanished. In his place stood something older, something colder, something that had walked through fire and emerged unchanged. Then it is time to end this, he said, and Valera saw in his eyes that the quiet death was awake once more. Warlord Gorak landed in the palace courtyard as the suns reached their peak. His dropship burned a crater into the ancient stones that had stood for 1,000 years. 50 of his elite guard formed around him as the ramp lowered. Each one was a veteran of 100 battles, chosen from the finest warriors of the Keth Dominion. Gorak himself was massive, even by Keth standards. 9 feet tall, covered in ceremonial armor that had belonged to warlords for generations. His eyes burned with hatred and wounded pride. He had come to kill a queen and break an empire. He expected resistance. He expected guards and soldiers, and perhaps even a last desperate stand. He did not expect one man standing alone in the center of the courtyard. Danny. Cole waited in the shadow of a fallen pillar. He wore no armor. He carried no gun. In his right hand was a Thashan ceremonial blade, a weapon considered too light and delicate for real combat. It had been a wedding gift, meant for display only. One human? Gorok's voice echoed across the courtyard. The mighty Thashan Empire sends one human to face me? The Empire did not send me, Danny said. His voice was quiet but carried clearly in the silence. My wife asked me to deliver a message. Gorok's mandibles clicked with amusement. Your wife? You are the human who married the queen? The logistics coordinator? He laughed, a sound like stones crashing together. I have heard of you. They say you gave some advice during our first attack. Clever for a human. But advice will not help you now. The message, Danny continued as if he had not been interrupted, is this. Humans are persistent predators. We do not run. We do not hide. We do not surrender. When we choose a target, we follow it across any distance, over any terrain, for as long as it takes. We never stop. He raised the ceremonial blade. The metal caught the sunlight and gleamed. Your hunt ends here, warlord. You just do not know it yet. For a moment, Gorik was silent. Then he gestured to his guards. Kill him. Make it slow. 10 warriors advanced, weapons ready. They moved in formation, professional and confident. They had killed thousands of enemies together. One unarmed human was not even worth their attention. Danny moved. He did not charge or retreat. He simply flowed forward like water finding cracks in stone. The first warrior swung a massive blade. Danny stepped inside the arc, too close for the weapon to matter. The ceremonial blade slid through a gap in the armor at the throat. The warrior fell. Danny was already moving to the next target. He caught a thrust on his blade, redirected it into another guard, and used a moment of confusion to strike twice more. 4 warriors down in as many seconds. The remaining 6 hesitated. They had never seen anything move like this. This was not fighting as they understood it. This was something else. Something that did not follow the rules of combat they had learned. Danny gave them no time to adjust. He was among them like a shadow, his blade finding every weakness, every gap, every moment of vulnerability. He fought without wasted movement, without emotion, without mercy. Each strike was precise. Each step was calculated. Each death was inevitable. In 20 seconds, 10 elite Keth warriors lay dead in the courtyard. Danny stood among the bodies. His breathing had not changed. His hands were steady. A thin line of blue blood ran down the ceremonial blade. He looked at Gorok. Send more, he said quietly. Or come yourself. Gorok's eyes had changed. The amusement was gone. In its place was something new. Recognition. Fear. Where are you? The warlord asked. I am a logistics coordinator, Danny replied. I arrange for things to be where they need to be. Right now, I need you to be dead. Gorok roared and charged forward. He was massive, fast, covered in armor that could withstand starship weapons. He had killed hundreds of enemies with his bare hands. He was the greatest warrior the Keth had, produced in generations. Danny waited. The warlord swung a fist that could shatter stone. Danny stepped aside, letting it pass within inches of his face. He did not counterattack. He simply moved. Gorok swung again. And again. Each blow was powerful enough to destroy. Each blow hit nothing but air. Danny flowed around the attacks like smoke, never quite where the warlord expected, never quite within reach. Stand still, Gorok bellowed. Fight me. I am fighting you, Danny said calmly. You are just too slow to see it. And then he struck. The ceremonial blade, so light and delicate, found the small gap between Gorok's helmet and chestplate. It slid in smoothly, precisely, driven by a hand that had made this exact movement thousands of times before. Gorok froze. His eyes went wide. Impossible, he whispered. I am the warlord. I am invincible. No, Danny said quietly. You are just another target. He withdrew the blade. Guruk fell to his knees, then collapsed face first onto the ancient stones. The remaining guards stared in shock. Their warlord, their leader, the greatest warrior of their generation, was dead, killed by a single human with a decorative blade. Danny looked at them. Go home, he said. Tell your people what happened here. Tell them that the Thashan Empire is protected. Tell them that humans do not forget and do not forgive. Tell them that if they ever threaten this world again, I will come for them. Not their soldiers, not their generals, them, personally, in their homes, in their beds. Wherever they hide, I will find them. He pointed the bloody blade at the dropship. Go, now. They ran. The finest warriors of the Keth Dominion ran from one man standing alone in a ruined courtyard. Danny watched them go. Then, slowly, the tension drained from his body. The killer faded. The man returned. He looked up at the palace balcony where Valera stood watching. She had seen everything. The violence, the skill, the cold precision of a weapon doing what it was designed to do. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Then Valera smiled. And Danny smiled back. The war was over. The Keth would not return. The message had been sent to every civilization in the galaxy. The Thashan Queen's human husband was not to be underestimated. That evening, after the bodies had been removed, and the courtyard cleaned, and the victory celebrations begun, Valera found Danny in the palace garden. He was kneeling in the dirt, checking on the tomato plants he had been growing for months. You could have anyone in the galaxy right now, she said. You could have power, fame, anything you wanted. Danny looked up at her. His hands were covered in soil. His face was peaceful. I have everything I want, he said. Right here. She sat beside him in the dirt, not caring about her royal will you teach me. She asked, how to garden. Danny laughed. It was a real laugh, warm and genuine, with no shadows behind it. Yes, he said. I would like that very much. And so the quiet death became the Queen's gardener once more. But now the galaxy knew his name. Now every enemy of the Thashan Empire knew what waited for them if they stepped out of line. Humanity had sent their best. And their best just wanted to grow tomatoes. Some weapons, it turned out, were most dangerous when they chose peace. 5 years passed. In the great timeline of the Volanti Empire. 5 years was nothing. A blink of an eye. A single breath in a life that spanned millennia. But for Danny Reyes, those 5 years changed everything. He learned to speak the Volanti language without a translator. He learned their history, their customs, their art. He learned which nobles could be trusted and which ones smiled while planning betrayal. He learned to walk through crystal halls with his head held high, even when whispers followed him like shadows. And slowly, impossibly, he began to change them too. It started small. A Volanti scientist asked Danny about human music, and Danny spent an afternoon teaching her to play guitar. A young noble wanted to understand why humans cried at sad stories, and Danny gave him a book of poems that made him weep for the first time in 300 years. A warrior asked what it felt like to know you might die in battle, and Danny told her about the human soldiers who charged into danger, knowing they might not come back. Little by little, humans began to arrive on Volanti Prime, not as visitors or tourists, but as partners. Human artists worked beside Volanti masters. Human engineers brought new ideas to ancient problems. Human doctors and nurses taught the Volanti about care and compassion, about holding someone's hand when medicine wasn't enough. And everywhere they went, humans brought their chaos. They laughed too loud and cried too easily. They fell in love at first sight and fought over small things. They made mistakes and apologized and tried again. They lived fast and burned bright and refused to be quiet about any of it. The Volanti didn't know what to do with them. Some were annoyed. Some were disgusted. But many, more than anyone expected, were fascinated. These short-lived creatures from a backwater world had something the Empire had lost. Something precious. Something real. They had passion. Danny and Lyran had 3 children. The first was a daughter named Myra. She had her mother's silver eyes and her father's stubborn determination. By the time she was 5, she was asking questions that made philosophers uncomfortable. The second was a son named Carlos, named after Danny's grandfather. He had brown hair like his father and the Volanti gift for music. He could make instruments sing in ways that made people forget to breathe. The third was another daughter, Lucia. She was quiet and thoughtful, always watching, always thinking. She saw patterns in things that others missed. The scholars said she would change the galaxy someday. Danny believed them. The children were strange and wonderful, a blend of 2 worlds that had never been blended before. They grew up speaking 2 languages, following 2 sets of traditions, belonging to 2 species. They were something new, something that had never existed before. And they were not alone. Other marriages followed. Other unions between humans and Volanti, between humans and species from distant worlds. The barriers that had seemed so solid began to crack. The rules that everyone had accepted for thousands of years began to change. Ambassador Keth Varishan came to Danny on a quiet evening, 20 years after the wedding. The old diplomat looked tired. The arguments he had made against the marriage seemed foolish now, even to him. "I was wrong," he said simply. It had taken him 20 years to say those words. But he said them. Danny nodded. "What changed your mind?" "Your daughter, Mira," the ambassador said. "I watched her debate the Grand Council last month. She is 11 years old, and she made fools of beings who have lived for centuries." He shook his head slowly. "She is not Volanti. She is not human. She is something else. Something better. She's just a kid," Danny said. "She's my kid. She is the future." The ambassador looked at Danny with something like wonder. "You were the future too. I was just too blind to see it." Crown Prince Severin became one of Danny's closest allies, though they never quite became friends. Some distances were too great to fully bridge. But when threats arose against the Empire, when old enemies tested their strength, Severin and Danny stood together. The Prince of Ancient Blood and the Prince from New Mexico. Tradition and change. Ice and fire. It worked, somehow. On Earth, in a small town in New Mexico. Danny's parents grew old surrounded by wonders they never could have imagined. Their grandchildren visited when they could, traveling across the stars to eat Elena's cooking and listen to Miguel's stories. The whole town came out to see them. The alien princess and the human soldier, home where it all began. He always was a dreamer, Elena would tell anyone who asked. She kept pictures of Danny and Lyran on every surface of her house. "I just didn't know the universe was listening." Miguel would laugh and shake his head. "The universe didn't listen," he would say. "Danny made it listen. That's what humans do." Years became decades. Decades became a century. The historians would call it the human integration. They would write books about it, study it, debate its causes and effects. They would talk about trade agreements and technology transfers and diplomatic achievements. They would analyze charts and graphs and data. But those who had been there knew the truth was simpler. A princess had looked at a soldier and seen potential. A soldier had looked at a princess and seen possibility. They had bet everything on a chance, on a hope, on a feeling that couldn't be measured or explained. And they had won. Danny Reyes lived to be 93 years old. By human standards, a good long life. By Volanti standards, barely a heartbeat. On the day he died, Lyran sat beside him, holding his hand like she had held it on their wedding day. "Are you scared?" she asked, the same question she had asked on their first night together. "Terrified," Danny said. His voice was weak now, but his eyes still sparkled. "But you know what they say. The best adventures always start with fear." He died with a smile on his face, surrounded by his children and grandchildren, surrounded by the family he had built across the stars. Lyra mourned him for 50 years. Valanti grief was long and deep, but she did not regret her choice. She never regretted it for a single moment, because Danny Reyes, the corporal from New Mexico, had shown the galaxy what it meant to be human. He had shown them that short lives could matter, that ordinary people could change the universe, that love and hope and stubborn courage were worth more than all the power in the stars. And the galaxy remembered. On 100 worlds, they told the story of the soldier and the princess. They told it to their children and their children's children. They added details and changed names and made it more beautiful with every telling. But the heart of the story stayed the same. She chose him from all the soldiers. "This is the human I want," she said. "I will marry him." And together, they reminded an ancient empire what it meant to hope. The galaxy was never quite the same, but then again, it wasn't supposed to be.